Okay. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. This really sums up what we're doing in one-on-one coaching. See, as adults, we have had all of these experiences across our life, particularly as children, that have created the way we see the world, that have created our vision and our perspective on our experiences. And often, for many of us, we have unconscious patterns that we are doing on reloop that we won't necessarily be aware of, and yet are having a direct impact in terms of how we experience life today. And more often than not, actually the core impact on why you're struggling to create the changes that you want to create. So through one-on-one coaching, what we are doing is we are working with the unconscious mind to uncover the patterns, uncover what the deep beliefs are, so that we can actually create changes at that level. It's really common for people to be working on a particular goal. They're wanting to make a change in their life, and they're doing this from the conscious perspective. They've decided consciously that they want to make a change, and yet they keep repeating patterns over and over again and feel like they're never going to be able to create the change. And that is because it is something at the unconscious mind level that is actually a pattern that they're completely unaware of. So today we are going to get a basic understanding of the conscious versus the unconscious mind. We're going to understand the role of the unconscious mind. We're also going to get an understanding of how we have actually created these unconscious beliefs and patterns and our model of the world. And then we're going to finish off with how you can start to really take control of your life and create the changes. So let's get stuck in. So the conscious and unconscious mind, I'd like you to think of them like an iceberg. The conscious mind is the part of the mind that we are more engaged with on a regular basis, but it actually only makes up 10% of our whole experience, our whole mind. So the 10% is the conscious mind right at the top here. And the rest of our mind is made up by what's called the unconscious. And sometimes people also refer to this as the unconscious and the superconscious. And that is actually the remainder of the iceberg, which is quite significant. So you would have heard the term neuroplasticity, the fact that, science demonstrates that we can actually change the way we think, we can change our neural pathways in our mind. Our mind has the ability to be reprogrammed, and ultimately that is what we are doing in one-on-one coaching. And it's really important to really understand this first and foremost to help you understand why it's possibly been difficult to make the changes that you've wanted to make up until this point. Or why, even though you've wanted to not continue to be triggered emotionally by, past events, why that could still be happening. And this is because even if you're consciously deciding that you want to not be affected by that situation anymore, or you don't want to not trust anymore, or you don't want to keep not prioritizing yourself, at the unconscious level, there could be blocks or patterns of behavior that are so inbuilt that that's actually what's stopping you from getting what you want. So think of the conscious mind as the goal setter and the unconscious mind as the goal getter. So you've made the decision to create some change. You've made the decision that the way you are experiencing life right now is not the way you want to continue. And the next step is that we now work with the unconscious mind to help you get to where you want to be. So the role of the unconscious mind stores our memories. It organizes our memories. It represses memories with unresolved negative emotions. If you can imagine, as a young child, we would have experienced many circumstances where we've had an uncomfortable negative experience in the body. Simply a baby crying and not necessarily being picked up and soothed straight away meant that we had an experience of a negative emotion just in that moment. and see if you can imagine over our lifetime, if we had, if our mind was, letting us feel every single situation to the full extent and the negative emotions attached, then we would really struggle to live and live well. So the unconscious mind has been repressing memories, storing and organizing memories, and making sense of situations that have brought about negative emotions in our bodies over time. And that has actually started to create these patterns. The unconscious mind will also present repressed memories for resolution. So even through our initial discussions, you might have been quite surprised about some of the things that came up for you, some of the memories that you hadn't thought of for some time, that you didn't recall, and you've started to think about in a different way. So the unconscious mind will do this so that we can start to heal some of that past and start to release it from the body. The unconscious mind's real prime responsibility is running the body and preserving the body. So part of it, by repressing memories that had negative experiences attached, is part of preserving the body, because there would be only so much that we could experience for our body to actually continue to function. The unconscious mind is incredibly symbolic. So when bringing up repressed emotions, they won't always necessarily make sense to us consciously. It takes everything personally, and it needs repetition until habits are installed. So as we've talked about in the start of working together, we do a certain amount of work within session, but then there is the part of the work to create real change, which happens out of session, and that is taking action. So if we're setting tasks, if you've decided that there's a new habit of behavior that you want to do, it's about repeating. Focusing on what you want is also part of that, because it's getting us to shift the way we have been seeing things, or the thoughts that we have been having, and reframing to the thoughts that we want to have. So let's look at how we actually come to experience life. So what is absolutely incredible, and this, when we really understand this, this is pretty powerful. So if we think of just your experience right now as an adult, between the news, the media, social media, observing the world, the interactions that we have with people, we are having experiences, we are having sensory input constantly. And it's believed that we roughly have 400 billion bits of information coming at us all the time. And you might recall an example where maybe you and a friend or a family member have, had an event in the past together. Maybe there was a birthday party or a holiday that you went on, or even an argument. And your recollection of that experience is very different to theirs. And this is because no two people can possibly process and take in all of the information that is coming at them at any given moment. So we actually can't take in 400 bits of information. It's just not possible to process all of that. So there is a number of different things happening in terms of what we actually take on. So the way we experience the world is visually. It's what we see. It's auditory. It's what we hear. It's kinesthetic. It's what we feel. And then it can be taste, and also how we think about what we see and experience. So that is what the VAKOG and AD represents. These are all the senses that we have available to us as to how we receive information. Now, some people might be more visual and therefore remember the visual components of an experience more so, versus someone else that is more feeling based and might not necessarily remember the visual or what was said, but they remember how it made them feel. So that is one point of difference as to someone's model of the world, how you use your senses to actually experience what you take in. Next, as I said, it's not possible for us to process all of those 400 bits of information. So our unconscious mind is responsible for preserving and storing memories. And in order to do that, it goes through the process of delete, distorting, and generalizing the information that we receive. So your way of thinking, the way your unconscious mind is working, is basically going to be taking in that bit of information and working out what's relevant, what's not relevant, or what it seems similar to another experience we have. So therefore, we're just going to generalize it and call it that. So there is other layers of information happening in order to help it to work out what information to take on board. And that is language. So the different language we've experienced over time as to what we might pick up. It's memories, our already existing memories will have an impact on what we might take on board or how we might see the world or how we might generalize things. Previous decisions, values and beliefs, which may have been picked up by our family or that we have started to establish in our younger years. The attitudes of the people that we've hung around with. So if we think about our environment that we've grown up in, it very much influences our model of the world and how we see things. So all of this information is coming at us. Our unconscious mind, because its role is to preserve the body first and foremost, it's to preserve and store memories. It is processing all of that information based on those filters. And then ultimately it will restore or store 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. So if I asked you to name off the some different types of soft drink, it's likely that you'll be able to name off consciously between 7 to 2 different brands. Maybe you can give that a bit of a go now. So that's the information that we have conscious memory of. The rest is going into the unconscious mind. And it's this unconscious mind's collection of that data that then shapes our internal representation or our model of the world. Now, based on that, we then can have a state, our experience of the information we receive, which directly impacts our physiology. So what we feel, how we interact with our body, and then that can then impact our behavior or does impact our behavior. So let's take an example. We might have an argument with our partner. Now, it's likely not the first argument we've had. We've probably had multiple arguments with this person. However, this particular argument we may see from our model of the world that particular argument is actually very similar to something in the past. So at the unconscious level, we might hear our partner say something to the effect of, I don't understand, you're not making any sense. And if we have had that experience multiple times as a child, and our unconscious mind made a particular meaning of that, we might then go into the state we experienced as a child. So if they're saying they didn't understand or it doesn't make sense or we're being emotional or overreacting, it's likely we've had something similar in terms of that experience as a child, and it brings about a physiology experience that might be confusion, it might be hurt, it might be I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, and that is not actually happening consciously. That's an unconscious experience, but it's bringing about an internal experience of the information we're seeing out here or hearing out here. Our unconscious mind has had that experience multiple times over, but has made a particular meaning of it in order to just make sense of it and in order to process it. So it brings about a state, an experience in us, which has a direct impact on how we feel or our physiology. Maybe it brings about a discomfort in our stomach, for example, or a tightness in our chest. And then our direct response or our behavior to that could be anything like shutting down. It could be getting very, very emotional. It could be getting into a state of depression or anxiety. So that is basically a little snapshot of the cycle. And this, whilst it seems a little bit complicated, the simplicity of it is that through our whole life, we have had multiple experiences, some good, some not so great. And in order for our unconscious mind to look after the body throughout that whole time, it has processed the information we've taken in a certain way. It has made sense of it and it's basically stored it or repressed it. However, when similar events might pop up in our life that we have made a certain meaning of, that's what takes us back into the loop or the cycles of behavior that may not necessarily be actually that beneficial to us today. So in knowing this, and if we can really start to understand that this is just a cycle of how we work, it's also, therefore, we can understand that we can start to make different meanings. If we understand the cycles, if we understand the patterns, if we uncover some of the past in order to start to make different meaning and sense of it, then we can actually start to really create real change. So a massive step we need to move from is from being at the effect of the world around us and our experience to cause. So most of us can often be at the effect of life, and we want to get ourselves to the place where we are causing life or we are creating. So when we are at the effect of life, we have reasons or excuses why our life is the way it is. And in doing that, it's then we have a loss of self-power, or we are sitting in a state of victim. I'm impacted by that, therefore I am the way that I am. This happened to me in the past, therefore this is how I am as an adult today. And it's not to take away the impact or that, there are past events and circumstances and things in relationships that have been unfortunate and have been hurtful. It's not to discredit those experiences, but it is seeing it from the lens of, whilst we always make them the person or that situation bigger than our ability to create change, then we're actually not going to be able to create change. So we need to be able to move from those situations in the past having been our reasons for how we are today, and or the excuses for why we don't have what we want, to moving to seeing it through possibly a different layer of information, looking at how we can now take charge. What can we do today to create change? What can I do at the unconscious level in order to make a different meaning of that experience? There is always light and dark to every single person, situation, and circumstance. And it's often that when we really start to peel back the layers on the events from the past, we can see how, whilst they impacted us, there is also, they've impacted us in a way that is actually really beautiful for us as adults. Often people that experienced very, very challenging things as children become adults that are incredibly empathetic, that are incredibly caring, that have the ability to have compassion, and they are incredible gifts. So it's in us starting to understand the patterns of behavior that we have in order to start making changes. We're making them conscious from the unconscious so that we can start to be the creator. We can start to create results or focus on results. And then we are stepping into our self-power, and we are no longer at the impact or the effect or the victim as a result of the past, but we are now stepping into full responsibility and creating more freedom for ourselves. And it is incredibly liberating when you start to realize that you do not have to be the outcome or the reason for a past experience, and you actually get to take charge and create a different story. And ultimately create a broader, more diverse way of seeing the world. That it's not just black and white, that situation A doesn't just equal B, that there can be multiple circumstances or outcomes. So the sum total of both your conscious and unconscious thoughts have brought you to where you are today. And what we are going to be doing is making more of the unconscious conscious, so that moving forward, you can have more control and liberation over your thoughts. And you can start to and continue to focus on what you want and not what you don't want. And this ultimately will impact your experiencing life, not just today, but tomorrow and into the future. So this is where we create real change by working with the unconscious mind going forward. And this is what's to come in one-on-one coaching.